You've spent your entire life trying to become someone worth loving. And the cruelest part is that the person you needed to become was always just yourself. Every morning you wake up and put on the acceptable version, the one that smiles at the right moments and says the right things and never asks for too much. And somewhere deep in your chest, there's this quiet ache that you've learned to ignore because acknowledging it would mean admitting that you've been abandoning yourself for years. That version of you that you present to the world, the one everyone seems to like just fine, isn't actually you at all, and you know this. You've always known this, but the thought of letting anyone see the real thing underneath feels like standing naked in a crowded room. Where are you watching this from right now? And what part of that just landed in your body? Drop a comment, because I need to know I'm not alone in this. And if this is hitting something true in you, hit that like button, not for me, but as a signal to yourself that you're ready to stop performing and subscribe, because we're going deeper than you've probably ever gone with this. And you're going to need to come back to these words when the old patterns try to pull you back. You know that thing you do where someone asks how you are, and you automatically say fine even when you're falling apart inside. That's not politeness. That's not social grace. That's the sound of you erasing yourself in real time, translating your actual experience into something more palatable, more acceptable, less threatening to the carefully constructed image you've been maintaining since you were old enough to understand that love came with conditions. You do this dozens of times a day without even noticing anymore. Your partner asks what you want for dinner and you say whatever you want even though you have a preference, because expressing that preference feels dangerous somehow, like it might reveal too much need, too much self, too much of the person you've been taught to keep hidden. At work, you nod along with ideas you disagree with because disagreement might mark you as difficult, might threaten your belonging, might expose the fact that you have your own thoughts and opinions that don't perfectly align with everyone else's. With your friends, you laugh at jokes that aren't funny and pretend to enjoy activities that drain you, because the alternative is being the one who ruins the mood, the one who's too sensitive, the one who doesn't fit. The exhaustion you feel isn't from working too hard or sleeping too little, though you probably do both of those things. The exhaustion lives in your bones because you've been running two operating systems simultaneously for so long that you don't remember what it feels like to just be one person. There's the you that exists in private, in those moments alone in your car or your shower or late at night when everyone else is asleep. The you that feels things deeply and wants things desperately and has opinions that might upset people and needs that feel too big to voice. And then there's the you that you show the world, carefully calibrated to be just enough but never too much, present but not imposing, helpful but not needy, confident but not arrogant, vulnerable but not broken. The gap between these two versions of yourself is where all your energy goes, spent in constant translation, constant performance, constant vigilance to make sure the real you never accidentally slips through. You've become so good at reading rooms, at sensing what's wanted from you and delivering it, that you've lost track of what you actually want. Someone asks what movie you want to watch, and your mind goes blank because you've trained yourself to want what others want, to prefer what's easiest, to desire what causes the least friction. You scan their face for clues about what answer would please them most, what choice would make you most likable, most acceptable, most safe. This happens so fast you don't even notice you're doing it anymore. It's become your default mode, this constant orientation toward others' expectations rather than your own experience. And the worst part is that it works. People do like this version of you. They find you easy to be around, low maintenance, agreeable. They have no idea that the person they're interacting with is a carefully constructed avatar, a performance so practiced it feels almost real even to you. But your body knows. Your body has been keeping score this whole time, tracking every moment of self-betrayal, every time you smiled when you wanted to scream, every time you said yes when everything in you was screaming no, every time you made yourself smaller to make someone else more comfortable. The anxiety that lives in your chest, the tension that never quite leaves your shoulders, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, the vague sense of emptiness that follows you through even your happiest moments, these aren't random symptoms. These are your organism trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that something is profoundly wrong, that you're living in a way that violates your fundamental nature, that the performance is killing you slowly. You learned this so early, you don't even remember learning it. Maybe you were 4 or 5, excited about something, your whole body alive with enthusiasm, and you ran to show your parent, and they were tired or distracted or dealing with their own pain, and they snapped at you or ignored you or told you to calm down, to be quiet, to stop being so much. And in that moment, something in you understood. Your realness is too much. Your enthusiasm is a burden. Your full self is not welcome here. So you learn to dim it, to package it, to present only the parts that were acceptable. Or maybe you were 7 and you cried about something that mattered to you, and someone told you that you were being too sensitive, that you were overreacting, that you needed to toughen up, and you learned your feelings are wrong. Your emotional responses are excessive. Your inner experience cannot be trusted. Or maybe you were 10 and you disagreed with something an adult said and you were punished for being disrespectful, for talking back, for not knowing your place. And you learned your thoughts are not valuable. Your perspective is not welcome. Your truth is less important than their comfort. These weren't dramatic moments of abuse or trauma, not necessarily. They were just the ordinary ways that love got made conditional. The everyday messages that taught you that acceptance required performance, that belonging demanded self-erasure, that safety meant hiding. And because you were a child and children are brilliant at adaptation, you learned. You learn to read faces and adjust your behavior accordingly. You learn to suppress the parts of yourself that created friction and amplify the parts that earned approval. You learn to become what was wanted rather than who you were, and it worked. You survived. You got the love and attention and belonging you needed, or at least some approximation of it. The strategy was successful. Except that strategy that saved you as a child is destroying you as an adult. Because you're not a child anymore, dependent on others for survival, needing their approval to literally stay alive. But your nervous system doesn't know that. Your nervous system is still operating from those early programs, still convinced that being yourself is dangerous, that authenticity threatens survival, that the only way to be safe is to perform. So you keep doing it, this constant self-translation, this exhausting vigilance, this abandonment of self in service of acceptance, and it's costing you everything. the depression you feel, if you're willing to call it that, or maybe you just call it flatness or numbness or a vague sense that life is happening to you rather than through you, that's not a chemical imbalance or a character flaw. That's what happens when you spend years disconnected from your actual experience. When you've built such thick walls between your real self and your presented self that you can't feel anything fully anymore. The anxiety that spikes at random moments, the panic that grips you for no apparent reason, that's your system trying to alert you that something is wrong, that you're living in a way that violates your nature, that the performance is unsustainable. The anger that occasionally breaks through, disproportionate and startling in its intensity, that's decades of suppressed truth trying to break free. All the times you said yes when you meant no, all the times you smiled when you wanted to scream, all the times you made yourself small, compressed into a rage that has nowhere to go. Your relationships feel hollow because they are hollow. How could they be anything else when the person showing up isn't really you? You're in there somewhere, behind the performance, but the people in your life don't know that person. They know the version you've shown them, the one that's carefully calibrated to be what they need, what they want, what they can handle. And maybe some part of you resents them for not seeing through it, for not pushing past your defenses to find the real you hiding underneath. But how could they? You've spent your entire life perfecting this disguise, making it seamless, making it convincing. You've gotten so good at it that even you can't always tell where the performance ends and the real you begins. And here's the thing that nobody talks about. Part of you doesn't want to stop. Because stopping means facing the terror of being truly seen. It means risking rejection, not of your performance, but of your actual self. It means discovering whether anyone would love the real you, the one with needs and opinions and rough edges and intensity. The performance, for all its cost, offers a kind of protection. If they reject you, at least they're rejecting the mask, not the face underneath. At least you can tell yourself that they don't really know you, that if they did, maybe it would be different. The performance lets you maintain that hope, that fantasy, that somewhere there's someone who would accept the real you if only they could see it. But what if I told you that the person who needs to accept the real you is you? What if the whole problem isn't that others won't love your authentic self, but that you've decided your authentic self isn't worth loving? What if every time you translate yourself into something more acceptable, you're sending yourself the message that who you actually are isn't good enough, isn't lovable, isn't welcome in the world? What if the person you've been abandoning all these years isn't some abstract concept, but the only person you'll spend every moment of your life with, the only consciousness you'll ever inhabit, the only self you'll ever be? I'm watching you right now through these words, and I can see all of it. I can see the person you show the world and the person you hide in private and the exhausted translator between them who never gets to rest. I can see the child who learned that love was conditional and the adult who's still trying to earn it. I can see the performance and the performer and the person underneath who's been waiting your whole life to be welcomed home. And here's what I need you to understand. All of it is acceptable. The parts you show and the parts you hide, the strengths you've developed and the wounds you carry, the ways you've adapted and the ways you've suffered, the person you've become and the person you've always been. All of it. Every contradictory, messy, complicated piece of you, it's all acceptable, it's all welcome, it's all worthy of love, not despite its imperfection, but because of its humanity. You don't need to become someone different to be worthy of acceptance. You don't need to fix yourself or improve yourself or transcend yourself. You need to stop abandoning yourself. You need to stop translating your experience into something more palatable. You need to stop performing for an audience that will never be satisfied because the performance itself is the problem, not the performer. Let me tell you about Sarah, though that's not her real name, but she's real. And her story is probably your story in different clothes. Sarah was 37 when she had what she called her breakdown, but what was actually a breakthrough. She was successful by every external measure, the kind of person whose life looked perfect on paper. Good job, nice apartment, active social life, long-term relationship. And she was miserable in a way she couldn't name, couldn't explain, couldn't justify given how good everything looked from the outside. She came home from work one Tuesday, nothing special about the day, and her partner asked what she wanted for dinner. And Sarah opened her mouth to say the thing she always said, "Whatever you want, I'm easy." And something in her just stopped. She stood there in the kitchen with her mouth open and no words coming out, and suddenly she was crying. Not gentle tears, but huge, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere so deep she didn't know she had access to it. Her partner was alarmed, kept asking what was wrong, what happened, and Sarah couldn't explain because she didn't understand it herself. All she knew was that she couldn't say whatever you want one more time. She couldn't translate herself one more time. She couldn't perform being easy and accommodating and low maintenance one more time. Something in her had reached its absolute limit. What followed wasn't pretty or linear or inspirational in the way transformation stories are supposed to be. Sarah spent the next 3 months in what felt like chaos. She started saying what she actually wanted, and people were confused, sometimes hurt, often frustrated. Her partner kept asking what was wrong with her, why she was being so difficult suddenly. Couldn't she just be normal again? Her friends started making comments about her being selfish, about her changing, about her not being fun anymore. And Sarah felt like she was losing her mind because she wasn't being difficult or selfish or different. She was just being herself, and the fact that this was causing such disruption made her realize how completely she'd been erasing herself before. She'd wake up at 3 in the morning with her heart racing, convinced she was making a terrible mistake, that she should just go back to being the easy version everyone preferred, but she couldn't. Something had broken open in her that couldn't be closed again. She'd spent 37 years making herself acceptable, and she was done. She was so tired. The exhaustion of performing had finally exceeded the fear of being real. Her relationship ended, which devastated her even though she'd known for years it wasn't right. Turned out her partner had fallen in love with the performance, not the person, and when Sarah stopped performing, there was nothing left between them. Some of her friendships dissolved too, the ones that had been built on her being a certain way, playing a certain role, never asking for too much or taking up too much space. And for a while, Sarah was lonely in a way that felt like it might kill her. She'd traded the hollow comfort of false connection for the stark reality of isolation, and she wasn't sure she'd made the right choice. But slowly, so slowly, she almost didn't notice it happening, something started to shift. She started sleeping through the night. The anxiety that had been her constant companion started to ease. She'd catch herself laughing and realize it was genuine, not the performed laugh she'd been doing for years. She started to notice what she actually wanted, not what she should want or what would make her most likable, but what genuinely appealed to her. She started to trust her own responses, her own preferences, her own experience. She started to feel like a person rather than a performance. And here's the part that surprised her most. New people started showing up in her life, people who were attracted to her realness rather than repelled by it, people who wanted to know what she actually thought, what she actually felt, what she actually needed. People who weren't looking for someone to play a role in their life, but who wanted to know another whole, complex, contradictory human being. The relationships she built from this place of authenticity were different than anything she'd experienced before. They were messier, more challenging, more honest, and infinitely more nourishing. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt truly seen, and being seen didn't destroy her the way she'd always feared it would. It freed her. Sarah's story isn't about becoming a different person. It's about stopping the exhausting work of being the wrong person. It's about what happens when you finally let yourself be who you've always been underneath the performance. It's about the terror and the loneliness and the grief of that transition. And it's about the aliveness and the peace and the genuine connection that becomes possible on the other side. But here's what nobody tells you about choosing authenticity. It doesn't just affect you, it disrupts entire systems, because your family, your workplace, your friend groups, they've all organized themselves around the version of you that you've been showing them. They've built expectations and dynamics and unspoken contracts based on you playing a certain role. When you stop playing that role, when you start showing up as yourself, it creates instability in the system. People get uncomfortable. They try to pull you back into the familiar pattern because your authenticity threatens the equilibrium, forces them to look at their own performances, challenges the unspoken agreements that have been holding everything together. Your mother might say you've changed. And what she means is you've stopped being the person who absorbs her anxiety without complaint. Your boss might say you're not a team player anymore. And what he means is you've stopped saying yes to everything, regardless of your capacity. Your friends might say you're being selfish, and what they mean is you've stopped making their comfort more important than your truth. These accusations will hurt. They'll make you doubt yourself. They'll tempt you to go back to performing because at least then everyone was comfortable, at least then you belonged. At least then you weren't causing problems. But here's what you need to understand. Their comfort was purchased with your self-betrayal. The peace in those relationships was maintained by your silence. The harmony in those systems required your self-erasure. And none of that is actually peace or harmony or connection. It's just a collective agreement to avoid truth, to maintain appearances, to keep everyone in their assigned roles, no matter the cost to their actual selves. When you start choosing authenticity, you're not being selfish. You're being honest. You're not causing problems. You're revealing problems that were always there, but that everyone agreed to ignore. You're not changing. You're stopping the exhausting work of being someone you're not. And yes, This will be threatening to people who've benefited from your performance, who've gotten comfortable with the version of you that never asks for too much or takes up too much space or expresses needs that might inconvenience them. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Their growth is not your job. Their awakening is not your burden to carry. You might lose people in this process. You probably will lose people. And it will hurt in a way that makes you question everything, makes you wonder if being yourself is worth the cost of belonging. But here's the truth that will sustain you through that grief. You never actually had those people. They had a version of you, a performance, a role. They didn't have the real you because the real you was never invited to show up. So what you're losing isn't genuine connection. It's the illusion of connection, the false comfort of being accepted for someone you're not. And as painful as that loss is, it creates space for something real to emerge. Let me tell you about Marcus, who learned this lesson in a completely different way. Marcus was the good son, the responsible one, the one who always did what was expected. He went to the college his parents chose, pursued the career they approved of, dated people they found acceptable. He was 32 years old and had never made a single major life decision based on what he actually wanted, because he'd never allowed himself to know what he actually wanted. His entire life had been organized around meeting external expectations, earning approval, maintaining his role as the son who never caused problems. And then his father died, suddenly, unexpectedly, and Marcus felt something he couldn't name at first. It wasn't just grief, though there was grief. It was something bigger, more complicated. It was rage. Rage at his father for dying before Marcus had worked up the courage to disappoint him. Rage at himself for wasting 32 years living someone else's life. Rage at the whole system that had convinced him that love required self-abandonment. The rage was so intense it scared him. He'd never felt anything this big, this uncontrolled, this true. In the months after his father's death, Marcus started making choices that baffled everyone who knew him. He quit his job at the law firm, the prestigious position his father had been so proud of. He started taking art classes, something he'd wanted to do since he was a teenager but had dismissed as impractical, frivolous, not serious enough. He ended his 3-year relationship with a woman his mother adored, but who he'd never really loved. He moved to a different city, somewhere no one knew him, somewhere he could figure out who he was without the weight of everyone's expectations. His mother was devastated, kept calling to ask what was wrong with him, why he was throwing his life away. Didn't he care about the family's reputation, about his father's legacy, about everything they'd sacrificed for him? And Marcus felt guilty, felt selfish, felt like he was betraying everyone who'd ever loved him. But underneath the guilt was something else, something he'd never felt before. Aliveness. For the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was inhabiting his own body, living his own life, making choices that came from his center rather than from his conditioning. It took him 2 years to stop feeling guilty every time he did something for himself. It took him 3 years to stop hearing his father's voice every time he made a decision. It took him 4 years to build a life that felt genuinely his, that reflected his actual values and desires rather than the ones he'd been taught to have. And even now, at 38, he still has moments where he questions everything, where he wonders if he made a terrible mistake, if he should have just stayed in the comfortable prison of everyone's expectations. But then he paints, or he wakes up next to the man he loves, a relationship he never could have had in his old life, or he has a conversation where he says exactly what he thinks and feels without translating it first, and he knows. He knows that this is what it means to be alive, not comfortable, not approved of, not safe in the way he used to understand safety, but alive, present in his own life, inhabiting his own skin, being himself without apology or explanation or the exhausting performance of being who others need him to be. Marcus's story shows us something crucial. The cost of authenticity is real. It's not nothing. You might lose relationships, opportunities, approval, belonging. But the cost of inauthenticity is higher. It's your life. It's your aliveness. It's your one chance to be yourself in a world that's constantly trying to turn you into someone else. And when you really understand that, when you feel it in your bones, the choice becomes clear even though it's not easy. What happens in your body when you stop performing? At first, it feels like free fall. Your nervous system panics because the strategies that kept you safe are gone. You might feel anxious, unmoored, like you're going to fly apart without the structure of the performance holding you together. This is normal. This is your system recalibrating. You've been living in a state of constant vigilance, constant control, constant self-monitoring. When you release that, there's a period of chaos as your organism learns to trust itself again. You might notice physical sensations you've been suppressing for years. Anger in your jaw, grief in your chest, fear in your belly. These aren't new feelings. They're old feelings that you've been holding at bay with the performance. When you stop performing, they surface. This isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're finally doing something right. Your body is releasing what it's been storing, processing what it couldn't process when you were focused on being acceptable. There's a moment, and it's different for everyone when it comes, where something settles, where the free fall ends and you land in yourself, where the chaos resolves into a different kind of order, not the rigid control of the performance, but the organic organization of a system that's finally aligned with itself. You start to notice that you have preferences and they don't feel dangerous anymore. You start to express needs and the world doesn't end. You start to say no, and people might be disappointed, but you survive their disappointment. You start to take up space and it feels good, natural, right. Your relationships begin to sort themselves. Some people can't handle this version of you and they leave. And it hurts, but it's also clarifying. The people who stay, who lean in, who get curious about this more authentic version of you, those are your people. Those are the ones who were always waiting for the real you to show up, and new people start appearing, drawn to your authenticity like it's a signal they've been searching for. People who are tired of performance themselves, who want real connection, who are brave enough to show up as themselves and want others to do the same. You start to trust your own experience in a way you never have before. When something doesn't feel right, you listen to that feeling instead of overriding it with logic or shoulds or what others expect. When something does feel right, you move toward it even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else. You start to understand that your organism, your whole self, has wisdom that your thinking mind doesn't have access to. Your body knows what's true. Your gut knows what's right. Your heart knows what matters. And when you stop translating and performing and controlling, when you create space to listen, that wisdom becomes available to you. This is what it means to be fully functioning, though nobody uses that language in real life. It means being responsive to your actual experience rather than to your ideas about what your experience should be. It means being open to new information, new feelings, new possibilities, rather than defending against anything that threatens your carefully constructed self-image. It means trusting the process of your own becoming rather than trying to force yourself into some predetermined shape. It means being comfortable with not knowing, with ambiguity, with the reality that you're always changing, and that's not a problem to solve, but a truth to embrace. It means accepting yourself, and this is the part that sounds simple but is actually revolutionary. Not accepting yourself once you've improved or achieved or transcended. Not accepting yourself despite your flaws. Accepting yourself as you are right now in all your messy, contradictory, imperfect humanity. Accepting the parts of you that are tender and the parts that are fierce. Accepting the wounds and the strengths. Accepting the ways you've adapted and the ways you've suffered. Accepting that you're both the person who performs and the person who's tired of performing. Accepting all of it without needing any of it to be different. This acceptance isn't passive or resigned. It's not giving up or settling. It's the opposite. It's the foundation for genuine change. Because you can't transform from a place of self-rejection. You can't grow from a place of believing you're fundamentally flawed. You can't become who you're meant to be while hating who you are. The actualizing tendency, that pull toward wholeness and growth and becoming, it's not something you create through effort or discipline or self-improvement. It's something that's already there, already pulling you toward your full potential, and the only thing blocking it is your resistance to yourself, your rejection of what is, your insistence that you should be different than you are. When you accept yourself, really accept yourself, not as a concept, but as a lived experience, something extraordinary happens. The energy you've been spending on self-rejection becomes available for growth. The attention you've been using to monitor and control and perform becomes available for presence. The life force you've been directing toward becoming acceptable becomes available for becoming yourself. And you start to change, not because you're trying to, but because that's what living organisms do when they're not spending all their energy on defense and performance. You start to unfold, to expand, to discover capacities and possibilities you didn't know you had because you were too busy trying to be someone you're not. This is the invitation, not to become someone different, but to stop the exhausting work of being someone you're not. Not to fix yourself, but to accept yourself. Not to transcend your humanity, but to fully inhabit it. Not to perform perfectly, but to be present imperfectly. Not to earn love through achievement, but to recognize that you're worthy of love simply because you exist, because you're here, because you're a human being having a human experience in all its complexity and contradiction. The choice is right here, right now, as you read these words. You can close this and go back to performing. Go back to translating yourself into something more acceptable. Go back to the exhausting safety of being who everyone expects you to be. And nobody will blame you. It's scary to stop performing. It's terrifying to be real. It's vulnerable to show up as yourself without the armor of acceptability. The performance has protected you in its way, even as it's cost you everything. Or you can start right now, in this moment, with something small. You can notice the next time you're about to translate yourself and just pause. Notice the impulse to say whatever you want when you have a preference. Notice the urge to nod along when you disagree. Notice the habit of making yourself small to make others comfortable. Just notice it. You don't have to do anything different yet. Just notice the mechanism, see it clearly, recognize how automatic it's become, and then maybe, just maybe, you try something different. You express the preference, you voice the disagreement, you take up the space, and you notice what happens in your body when you do. Notice the fear, yes, but also notice the relief, notice the aliveness. Notice the sense of coming home to yourself. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that you survive. Notice that being yourself, even in this small moment, feels different than performing. Not necessarily better or easier, but more true, more real, more you. Start there. Start with noticing. Start with small moments of authenticity. Start with being yourself in low-stakes situations and building your capacity for it gradually. This isn't a dramatic transformation that happens overnight. It's a practice, a process, a gradual reclamation of yourself from all the ways you've learned to abandon yourself. It's patient work. It's tender work. It's the most important work you'll ever do. Because at the end of your life, you won't regret the times you were too much or too honest or too yourself. You'll regret the times you weren't. You'll regret the years spent performing for an audience that was never satisfied. You'll regret the relationships built on pretense rather than presence. You'll regret the life you didn't live because you were too busy being acceptable. You'll regret the self you never met because you were too afraid to let them out. So here's the question that will follow you from this moment forward. How much longer are you willing to abandon yourself? How many more years will you spend translating your experience into something more palatable? How much more of your life will you sacrifice to the performance? And what would become possible if you stopped? If you let yourself be seen fully as you actually are, if you trusted that your authentic self is not only acceptable but necessary, not only worthy of love, but the only version of you that can actually receive love, you don't need permission to be yourself. You don't need to earn the right to take up space. You don't need to become someone different to be worthy of acceptance. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. You just need to come home. You just need to let the person you've always been underneath the performance finally breathe. That person is still there. Waiting. They've been waiting your whole life. They're waiting right now. And they're not asking you to be perfect or enlightened or transformed. They're just asking you to stop pretending they don't exist. They're asking you to acknowledge them, to listen to them, to let them have a voice in your life. They're asking you to choose them. Finally, after all these years of choosing everyone else's comfort over your own truth. This is the rewriting of your story, not through dramatic revelation or sudden transformation, but through the quiet, revolutionary act of accepting yourself, of being yourself, of trusting that who you are is enough, has always been enough, will always be enough. The story you've been living, the one where you have to earn love through performance, where you have to be acceptable to be worthy, where you have to abandon yourself to belong, that story is over. You can put it down now. You can walk away from it. You can start writing a different story, one where you're the author and the protagonist and the one who gets to decide what matters, what's true, what's worth your precious life. The pen is in your hand. The page is blank. The old story is over. What will you write now?